What is happening, everybody? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. And yes, of course, we finally get to talk a little bit more about Metroid Dread today, which is very exciting. And weirdly, this is very similar to how last week's Metroid Dread video played out, where I actually want to have a completely separate Metroid Dread related conversation with you guys. However, earlier this morning, they did reveal a brand new trailer and some new info about Metroid Dread, just like last week's video about the spoiler conversation. Now, earlier this morning, right before recording this video, Nintendo released what I think a lot of us were waiting for, which was kind of an overall Metroid Dread game overview trailer that they tend to do for a lot of their biggest first-party releases. It is an amazing 5-minute overview trailer of Metroid Dread featuring a lot of stuff we've already seen and a couple of glimpses into some stuff we haven't yet seen. It is amazing, so fantastic. It's not quite as impactful as like the actual trailer that they released last, because that was more of a trailer package, whereas this one has like a narrator talking about the exploration and the enemies and the bosses and things like that. And so it's great and very informative and does relate to today's topic in a way, but it's not the same as like an actual trailer, the way a trailer is typically put together. So it's amazing, definitely watch it. I wouldn't worry about spoilers as I talked about in my last video, it's just showing us more great Metroid stuff and reasons to be excited. But what I did want to talk about today is more the fact that we know a lot of people will be playing Metroid Dread for probably their first Metroid game they might ever have played, and I have a lot of thoughts about what that could mean for people, what you should know and shouldn't know going into the game, and maybe what a lot of newcomers can expect from a Metroid experience. Of course, before we dive any deeper into today's Metroid topic, I like to remind you guys I'm always trying to grow the channel here on Rule of Two Review. I upload videos every single week, and I talk about all things Nintendo. I cover every little thing about Metroid possible, and I discuss all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So I'm going to try to avoid doing much of a trailer reaction or overview recap from the overview trailer that Nintendo released this morning. I really don't want to dive too much into that. I already kind of told you at the beginning of the video some of my base level feelings, which is that it's amazing. Like I said, I think it's just a great trailer. It's a great overview of the game and what to expect. It gives some stuff to us who are familiar with Metroid. It gives a lot of stuff to the newcomers to Metroid, which is one of the most important aspects of this release and really the focus of today's conversation. And I like that it did kind of hint at some of my bigger theories and conversations I've been having with you guys for months about the Chozo and how the Chozo will play a role in this game, this final adventure in Metroid 5 here, and if the non-armor-clad Chozo that we've seen in the first two trailers is friendly or an enemy. And that's been a huge conversation, is I think that it really might be a friendly Chozo. In fact, I'm kind of betting on it, which to me is a more exciting version of that Chozo. Let the armor-clad Chozo, who's a warrior, actually be the enemy and the foe to Samus. I want the other Chozo to be a friendly and someone that reminds her of her past and her history with the Chozo. And this trailer very cleverly hints that that might be the case with that character. But instead, let's talk about the bigger conversation and the bigger concept today, which is, like we said here in the beginning, the fact that we know many people will be playing Metroid Dread for their first Metroid game that they've ever played. And there's a lot of factors that are kind of making that the case. And I think it's really twofold. One, and most importantly, is the fact that the game itself, just in its own bubble as a video game product being released, looks amazing. They have put so much time and energy and money and effort and manpower and care and love into Metroid Dread, and you can tell it is just visibly obvious by looking at the game and learning everything that we've learned about the game. This is going to be a fantastic video game, and that has people excited. The other, which we've talked about before as well, is what we like to call the Switch effect, right? The magic of the Switch, and the fact that on this console, which is so obscenely popular, everything sells. Any game, good or bad in many cases, really sells well, and most especially first-party Nintendo games sell like crazy, and they break records, and they become the most successful games within their respective franchises. And ever since Metroid Dread was revealed during E3 earlier this year, pretty much all of us have unanimously felt that Metroid Dread will become the most successful and popular Metroid game of all time. A, because it looks fantastic, and B, because it's releasing on the Nintendo Switch. And now, because I'm a YouTuber in the Nintendo and the gaming space, and somebody who is very well known for my Metroid fanship and my Metroid content, because I've made probably hundreds of videos about Metroid and Metroid Prime 4, and now I've probably made like 30 videos about Metroid Dread just since the game was revealed, I hear a lot of people, and I see a lot of people talking to me and responding in the comments of my videos, or sending emails or DMs to me, and also, of course, on Twitter and on, tweet threads and stuff for my videos on Twitter. I see and I hear a lot of people talking about their relationship to the Metroid franchise, their fanship of it, and their reactions to Metroid Dread, and a huge part of that conversation that I've been a part of is people telling me and stating that they will be playing Metroid Dread for their first Metroid game. So it really shows that what Nintendo is hoping to have happen with Metroid Dread is really probably going to happen. And more people than normal are going to be coming out to spend their money and buy Metroid Dread. And I am so thrilled to all of you who will be playing Metroid Dread for your first ever Metroid experience. I am so thrilled that you are jumping on board this Metroid hype train that many of us have been on for years or even decades in my case, pretty much since the first game on the NES. You're jumping on board this Metroid train, which really is worth your time and worth everyone's money and energy. And it's known for being one of the greatest video game series of all time, but also confusingly not selling the best. And so this is going to represent a turning point. And again, to those of you who are going to be buying and playing this game for the first time, you are part of what's going to make that happen. You are going to be joining in this Metroid experience along with all of us, and you're going to be helping make this game the most important, most popular, and most successful Metroid release ever. Now, I think it's pretty safe to assume that most people who will be playing Metroid Dread for their first Metroid game are still pretty familiar with the franchise and with Samus. Again, it's a franchise and a character that has been around for decades, and even diehard Nintendo fans who haven't ever played a Metroid game are down to be familiar with who she is and some of the elements of the lore and the kind of lineage of the franchise and its history. I mean, even if it's through something as simple as just Super Smash Bros., people know Samus and they know the Metroid name. But what about the people who really know nothing about it and are just going in totally blind based on the fact that these trailers for Metroid Dread look so good? What can these people expect? What can we all expect? One of the big conversations about Metroid Dread going into the release is the fact that the quote-unquote Metroidvania genre has really exploded over the past, I would say, 5 to 10 years. I mean, it's been around longer than that, and it obviously goes back to the original Metroid and Castlevania games in the early days in the 90s. But in specifically the last handful of years, the Metroidvania genre of games that aren't Metroid or aren't Castlevania games have really burst onto the scene, and a lot of people who've never even played a Metroid or a Castlevania game have gotten really excited and invested in these kinds of experience. Games like Dead Cells, games like Ori and the Blind Forest, games like Hollow Knight, Shadow Complex, so many other games we could list off, have really gotten people invested in this genre. And now, for the first time in a very long time, a brand new Metroid game comes along to get everyone excited, and this is really the game franchise that created the genre of games. So people who have gotten into the genre are now going to have a chance to play the first version of this game franchise that actually created this genre that they love so much. That's a very big deal and a very important moment. I think it's worth noting for newcomers that what you're going to find is that even though, and I've said this before, the story of Metroid and the overall Metroid franchise is not at the forefront of a Metroid game and a Metroid experience, it is, however, still very much there. And it's not even so much about quote-unquote story as it is about lore. What I've said several times is that I don't think Metroid has so much of a story as it does have lore. And I think that's actually more interesting because it puts the gameplay and the experience and the atmospheres and the ambience of the environments you're in at the forefront. And right behind that in the background is this great lore and the history of the locations and the races and the creatures that you're fighting and battling and meeting throughout the games. That's what's also present. So you're experiencing gameplay first while also getting this subtle, fantastic history and lore and context in the background. And with this game, Metroid Dread also being Metroid 5, and also being the furthest in the Metroid timeline we go, and we see the Galactic Federation, and we see the X-Parasite, and we see the Emu robots, and we see Kraid and all these other things happening, we know that there's going to be a lot of subtext and context within this experience. And people who've never played a Metroid game before are going to see, wow, there's a lot going on to this world and the chronology of the events of the Metroid franchise that I may not know much about, but I'm able to get a glimpse of it here in this game while still enjoying the incredible gameplay, the unbelievable backtracking, the great upgrades, and learning how fantastic Samus is as a character, and it very much might convince a lot of people to go back and play Metroid games that they've never previously been interested in. Obviously, we have to remind everyone and double down on the fact that Metroid Dread is Metroid 5. It is part 5 in the main series of games. There are plenty of other famous games out there that have made headlines and been very successful that people know but maybe don't understand that it's not actually part of the main story. These are all canon spin-off side stories, such as the very famous Metroid Prime trilogy, such as the very divisive Metroid Other M. These games are all canon and real events and battles and conflicts that Samus has gotten involved in throughout the years, but they've taken outside of the main numbered Metroid games. These are all spin-off games. Yes, even my favorite video game ever created, the original Metroid Prime, it is a canon spin-off of the main numbered Metroid games. And so obviously the Metroid games consist of Metroid 1, Metroid 2 The Return of Samus, Super Metroid, and Metroid Fusion. Of course, Metroid 1 was remade as Metroid Zero Mission, Metroid 2 was remade as Metroid Samus Returns, but in general, these numbered games, Metroid 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5, are the main story. And again, Metroid Fusion, which was Metroid 4, released in 2002 on the Game Boy Advance, and while we've had several Metroid releases since then, like Other M and Metroid Prime 3 and Hunters and Federation Force, Samus Returns, Zero Mission, at the end of the day, that was the last time we were further in the chronology of the franchise. And now, 19 years later, Metroid Dread being Metroid 5 will be the first time in almost 20 years we're going to see what actually happens next in this story. And even if you're thinking, wow, it's intimidating to jump into the Metroid franchise at number 5 and be so unfamiliar with Metroids 1 through 4, or so unfamiliar with the important spin-offs like the Metroid Prime trilogy or Metroid Other M, trust me, these games are brilliantly designed, and the story is so brilliantly crafted so that you can jump into Metroid 5 and still be able to follow along and enjoy the amazing experience. It's also incredibly important to note for you newcomers that they have confirmed and shown glimpses of a series recap that is going to play at the beginning of Metroid Dread. I imagine it's going to play out similarly to how the Mass Effect games have allowed you to do it in the past, where you can select to start the game without the recap because you already know the story, or you can select to start the game with the recap. And we've seen images of basically, you know, redone and recontextualized drawings and images and paintings or whatever that are kind of overall summarizing the original Metroid games leading into Metroid 5 as far as the story goes. And so, you know, they haven't confirmed the length. I'm going to guess it's going to be around 3 or so minutes long. And for newcomers, if you elect to watch this, you're going to get, you know, a 2, 3, 5 minute little kind of clip slideshow of images that is going to summarize Metroid 1, 2, 3, and 4 going into Metroid Dread. So you're going to be able to get caught up on the important parts of the story and the lore and the history so that you can know exactly what's going on going into Metroid 5. Sakamoto and Nintendo have been very upfront about this because they know that Metroid Dread is going to be a game that's very popular and people want to play, but they're also going to know a lot of people who haven't played the series might be confused, and they want this to be very easy for newcomers to just slide in and enjoy the Metroid Dread experience. So do not forget, you don't have to be intimidated by the story and the backstory of Metroid to enjoy Dread, because they're giving us a little recap movie at the beginning to get you caught up to speed right away. And so at the end of the day, I really just see Nintendo doing everything right with Metroid Dread. First and foremost, just from the development of the game itself, because it looks so mind-blowingly amazing, to the next fact of, reviving the Dread concept and making that Metroid 5, to all of the information and teasers and trailers that they've been giving us. I think the Dread reports are fantastic. I think the trailers and the doling out of some information and surprises has been fantastic. I don't think that they've been spoiling anything that's going to ruin the game or ruin the experience. I think they've been giving us the correct amount of information. And then, of course, again, giving us that short series recap at the beginning of Dread so that newcomers can get caught up to speed. These are all great, very smart business decisions from Nintendo and Mercury Steam, and I know that it's going to pay off. I know that Metroid Dread is going to be a mind-blowing experience. It might even be the best Metroid game ever made. Who knows? And of course, because it's releasing on the Switch, where everyone loves to buy games on the Switch, it's going to be the most successful and popular Metroid game, essentially changing the whole future and the fate of the Metroid franchise forever. And changing it for the good, I might add. So this is an exciting time. We are now officially less than 1 month to go. I'm excited for all of my fellow Metroid fans to love this game, and I'm very excited for all of you newcomers to jump on board and find out what the hype has been about for the last 30 years. This is a great time, so it's a time to celebrate. And that's all I have to say about that. What do you think about my conversation and opinions today? What do you guys think? Share that in the comments below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.